Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
yes. Yes.
Okay, thank you so much. So, we are going to begin Robert Frost's Christmas tree today. So, before going on to that, I'll just ask you a question in the chat box. When you hear the name Robert Frost, what is the first word that comes to your mind? All of you students, from what you know about him, what is the first thing? I want all of you to type in the chat box. What is the first word? Good, road not taken. Exactly that. I think that is one of the most prescribed. And if you don't know, that is the most misunderstood poem of Frost also. Let me, since someone has already mentioned the road not taken, let me ask you a question. Which road did Frost take in the road not taken? Most of you might have already studied this. The less traveled. Okay, which is that one? Is it the first one, Sandeep, or the second one? He says, okay, I contemplated on the first road. Then I kept the first road for another day. And then I thought about the second one. So my question is, since all of you have probably studied this poem for your degree classes, which road did he take actually? The first one or the second one? Sandeep has said he took the road less traveled, but then as if we take for granted that it is the second road, it is also said that it is excessively worn out due to use. The excessively worn out anangil, then how is it less traveled? So did he take the first road or the second road? Any other answers for that very interesting question? All the students, there are my students also from Nehru Arts and Science College. Let us make this into a discussion forum. Okay, another question to you. If he has taken either road A or road B, then why is it called the road not taken? It should be the road taken, isn't it? Okay, so I have deconstructed that poem for you. We probably will have another class on the road not taken. So, what is another word that comes to your mind when we talk about Robert Frost? Or mending wall, exactly. Then Ashwati says mending wall. Anybody else? Anything, any poem or any feature that comes to your mind? Oh, come on. I thought I'll have a very responsive class here. Diaspora. Thank you, Hakeem. So you have been following my PhD thesis. Okay. So I'll come to that aspect while introducing Frost to you. Hakeem, can you tell me how he is a diaspora? Who is a diaspora, students? Who is a diaspora? Someone who live. The popular conception of diaspora is someone who lives in their, in their native place, and if they go, who from their native place, if they go out to a foreign soil and settle down there and feel nostalgic for their native land. Okay, നാടിനോടുള്ള longing, nostalgia, connotations വരുമ്പോഴാണ് we call them a diaspora, right? You have so many diasporic writers, right, that you have studied, Jampa Lahiri, Salman Rushdie. You have all, and these are connotations. So that is a general conception, but diaspora has so many other, what do you say, it has so many other connotations. There are actually 4 different phases of diaspora. Since I've done my PhD in diaspora studies, this homeland hostland dichotomy, native soil, foreign soil, it comes, that is only one aspect. So that is why I have argued that Robert Frost is a part of the nature diaspora. There's a popular misconception, I'm coming to that, that he's a regional poet. But Frost, normally when we list all sorts of regional poets, we list, Dylan Thomas, Swansea poet, or, R.K. Narayan, Malgudi, and Thomas Hardy, Wessex. We have all these regional poets. There is a general tendency to list Robert Frost also as a regional poet. And which place is he affiliated to? Can anybody tell me? Which place is he affiliated to? Which place is he affiliated to? New England. Okay, just look in the chat box. He is generally affiliated to New England. Okay, look in the chat box. But that is the most misunderstood aspect of Frost. Frost never considers himself to be a New England or a regional poet. He himself said, to limit me to any place would be meanness, and he believes a more what do you say he's a more universal poet. There's an explicit statement where he says, I confess myself the author of several books against the world in general. To confine them to a place or a state or a region restricts my meaning. So that is why Frost, he always considered nature at his home, and he considers himself to be displaced from culture. And that kind of dichotomy is what happens when you stay in the village. As sir just said, we are all more of rural people. We all live in villages, but when we go to a city, what happens? We feel nostalgic for our homeland. So that nature culture displacement, that kind of diaspora, you find it also when a person goes from the village to the city. This is what you can find in essentially in this poem Christmas trees. In this Christmas trees also this idea of the diaspora. When you go, when you go to okay, you may enjoy. Suppose you go to a busy city like Bombay. Okay, you may enjoy the hustle and bustle of the city life. But after a while, you long for the smell of your soil. You want to come back. Many people, they go from, there's a saying that no matter which corner of the world you go to, you'll find a Malayali there. And we have we have the Malayali diaspora everywhere. It is a species that you will find anywhere. And what happens, you have so many narratives on the Gulf Malayali diaspora. People who have gone from here, from the Kerala to the Gulf, and they feel nostalgic. Apart diasporic longing, how is it manifest? Suppose Onam, they have, you have all kind of digital pukalams, digital tiruvadiras, and this is how they recreate the homeland. That is what diaspora is all about. And in this poem also, this poem is essentially about a person who comes to buy from the speaker. He has many fir trees, what do you call Christmas trees. Okay, Christmas trees. He has many fir trees in his farmyard, and a person from the city comes there and he wants to buy them. എന്തിനാണ്? Not only does he look at profit, as I told you, when you take a piece or a carpet like Pookalam and you place it in Dubai, okay, you get the feeling of a Nardinde, what do you see? You get that essence, that kind of diasporic longing, you try to fulfill it that way. So similarly, he feels that this Christmas tree, if you take it from nature and you place it in a living room, you get some kind of your diasporic longing for nature or the village is temporarily fulfilled. Okay, so on that note, I'll begin this poem for you. Are all of you following me? Okay. So just let me know. Stop. Sorry. Okay, I presume that you can see my screen. So, some basic facts about Robert Frost, something that you already know. I am here to deconstruct whatever you already know. We have generally that he is the farmer poet of America. He's the voice of America. He's the national poet of America. But something that he himself has said that please do not call me a regional poet. Do not limit my existence or my identity. He says all my poems comes from a place 14 miles in diameter. That's where they come from, but that's not where they go to. He also said that I am too tired of this mean provincialism. The meaning, he does not believe in regionalism. Okay, He himself is very clear in more than at least 7 statements. He has made it very clear that he is not a regional poet. This was something part of my PhD thesis. Second point, he is often termed, as I already said, a regional poet, even though he himself has reiterated or stated that he is not a regional poet. And he is a prolific poet who made a career in his late 30s. And not most people know that though he's an American poet, his career was actually made in England. He went there and he made a name for himself. He tried to, build some kind of living for him. He went into farming, and he was not that good at farming. Then he got from the inheritance he got from his grandfather. He decided to go to England, and it is there that he published his first book, A Boy's Will. And it is there his literary career was actually made in England. As he at that, and he was in touch with all the contemporaries like Ezra Pound, T.S. Eliot. And then what happens when he comes, and suddenly when the world war was actually, there was an impending world war, he has to come back, though he does not want to come back. That itself shows that he does not want to belong to any specific place. Like, he did not actually consider that he was not actually very nostalgic or wanted to be in America all the time. There's also another statement he says, when I always stay in one place, I think of the other place, meaning he does not pigeonhole or fit himself into any particular place. And then he comes back, and when he comes back, he comes back as a famous man. Now he's a well-known author. But the people, when he was in England, okay, he is a person who came from America. But when he comes back to America, they all the publishers wonder, should we give such a person so much importance who has a reputation that is made in England? So this is what you call the third space, that diaspora theory. Third space, liminality. Ivdiyuvalla, avdiyuvalla. I once read an article by Sachidanandan sir. He says that he lived most of his life in Delhi. When he's in Delhi, people treat him like a Malayali. And when he comes back to Malayali, they treat him as a person who has always lived in Delhi. So see, avdiyuvalla. You are living in liminality. This is what you call the third space in diaspora studies. Wait, someone has joined. Okay, fine. So as I've told you, this condition of being in liminality is what we call the third space in diaspora theory. And he was a very prolific writer, and significantly, he is the only poet to win 4 Pulitzer Prizes for poetry. The Congressional Gold Medal in 1960, and also he was Poet Laureate of Moment. And he has a huge career, and he has so many books to his credit. These are just some of the popular books: A Boy's Will, North of Boston, Mountain Interval, Selected Poems, New Hampshire, West Running Brook, A Further Range, and A Witness Tree. Just for your information, when you write the name of a book in your examination paper or notes, you have to underline it, and when you type it, you have to italicize it. Right? So I will come just, we have to complete the session in probably 1 hour. I already probably am lagging. And let us have a quick check at what are the features of Frost poetry. So Frost was known to have a very simple diction of language. Okay, you don't need a dictionary to look at, Frost's poems most of the time. He has a very simple diction and language. But then that simplicity itself, if you go to the second way, it is deceptive. Do you think, okay, suppose for example, I'll give you a poem. We already spoke of road not taken. Okay, he says, okay, I kept the first one for another day, and then I took the second road. And then the second road, he says, that is a road less traveled. And he also says it was worn out due to excessive use. Then how is the road less traveled? And if he has traveled, he took one of the roads, then how is the name of the poem The Road Not Taken? This poem is actually one of the most misunderstood poems of Frost, and it is also said to be a wolf in a sheep's clothing. This is about the deceptive simplicity of Frost. All Frost poem, if you look at it, looks very simple, but it says something very high. For example, if you go at mending wall, what does it looks like? Two, neighbors, they are fighting. One says he wants a wall, the other one says he doesn't want a wall. It is as simple as that. But then if you look at it very deeply, it is not about wall, it is about any boundary in any walk of life. That is the secondary meaning. And even, and if you look at it more deeply, it is uh, more deceptive. More than walls, he's talking about individuality. He's all apple and he's all pine trees and I'm apple orchard. That there is where we do not need the wall. So do you understand that if you if it just even just if you just imagine you have two identical twins, I mean a pair of identical twins who look totally exactly similar, and you put their names Sita and Geeta. Do you need a wall to actually show that Sita is different from Geeta? No, what actually differentiates them from each other is what comes from within, individuality. So this is something about the deceptive simplicity of Frost. It appears very simple, but there are so many layers of meaning hidden under it. The third one, epigrammatic proverbial statements. If you see all Frost's poetry, I mean, you get a lot of epigrammatic proverbial kind of statements in Frost. Good fences make good neighbors from mending wall. Uh, for stopping by woods on a snowy evening. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. In birches, earth's the right place. I don't know where it's likely to go better. But the irony is, Frost was totally against proverbial statements. He was against. That's why he says the neighbor only says good fences make good neighbors. That is actually that particular statement was actually a proverbial statement recorded already in American history. That is that comes in that poem actually. But the irony is, all Frost's statements have turned out to be proverbial or epigrammatic because Frost was a strong believer in individuality. He did not believe in repeating what other people said in proverbs. Like if I repeat a proverb, I am actually saying what someone already has said. You have to be a voice and not an echo, right? So that is why he was against proverbial statements. That is why the neighbor only says his father's statement, good neighbors makes good fences. But the thing is, his statements have actually turned out to be epigrammatic or proverbial. Then, from descriptive stanzas, he goes on to meditative or wisdom. For example, in a poem like Birches, if you look at it, he talks about a boy, bending the birches, playing with it, and he would like to bend it and go back to heaven and then come back to earth. But that is the descriptive part. After talking about that, in the second part, he goes on to the meditative part. I already told you there is a secondary level of meaning in every poem. So after pondering on the descriptive part, then they go on to the meditative part. Okay. The next feature is understatement. It is also called meiosis. Using saying the beauty about Frost is most of the things are said in a very subtle manner. Very subtle. He doesn't have to be loud. Suppose subtle, I know all you students know. Suppose I tell a student that you are not very happy today. That means that is a subtle way of saying you're sad today. You're very sad today. So that the best line from Frost that would describe his subtlety or his technique of understatement or meiosis would be, fact is the sweetest dream that labor knows, marking the signature of reality. And then another feature from him is using inverted statements, which is also called anastrophe. For example, how does mending wall begin? It begins with something there is that doesn't love a wall. Something there is that doesn't love a wall? Somebody had joined, so I just to switch the screen. Mending wall begins with something there is that doesn't love a wall. When the typical statement would be there is something that doesn't love a wall. So so he's totally inverting the statement. So this technique is known as using inverted statements, or it is also known as anistrophy. Something there is that doesn't love a wall would rather be in a normal language, it would be written as there is something that doesn't love a wall. Now, yeah, here I have listed that something there is that doesn't love a wall. So normally, how would you say this? There is something that doesn't love a wall. Another common figure of speech employed by Robert Frost is antimaria. Antimaria. Antimaria is when you use, we have different classes of words. What are they? Nouns, verbs, adjectives, adverbs, etc. Right? But sometimes, normally, suppose something, a word called, in Maya Angelou's Africa, he churched them. You can see that word, churched them. Normally, we find the word church or probably churches. Have you ever seen church? Church as a noun is converted into a verb there. A normal use that you don't see. This kind of, converting one class of a word into another is called antimaria. An example for Frost, for example, mending. Mending is normally used as an adjective. But in mending wall, he means that the wall has some kind of property of mending differences. And mending that is normally used as a verb is converted into an adjective here. That's so it is an example of antimaria. And in another poem called The Pasture, sorry, this is actually Pasture Spring. I wrote it as Pasture Fence. He says, I'm going to clear the pasture spring. Pasture is normally a noun by itself, but when you say pasture spring, pasture becomes an adjective, it becomes a modifier. Okay. So that is another characteristic tendency you find in Frost, antimaria. I think you can find it in this poem also that we're going to study today. And then you have duality. Duality means most of the time ambiguity that is there. This he says this is also there. In Road Not Taken, he wants to take the first one. He says, I wish at the beginning of the poem, he says, I wish I could travel both. In Stopping by Woods on a Snowy Evening, he says, the woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to sleep. That and this. In Fire and Ice, he says, I chose fire first. Then he says ice. Then he says fire. Then again he says, I want to choose ice. So this kind of duality in Birches, he says, I want to go to heaven. First he chooses earth, then he chooses heaven, then he says, oh, earth's the right place to live. I don't know where it's likely to go better, and he comes back. So this is another characteristic feature of Frost, the idea of duality. And, probably when you think of a poet called T.S. Eliot, what is the first notion that comes to mind? Okay, he's a critic and he's a poet, and you can see his learning very strongly, enmeshed in his poetry. But Frost, probably he was, according to most of the critics, much more learned than T.S. Eliot in the classics. And but he's someone who never, showed off his learning. He never wore his erudition on his sleeves, and you can find that his deep knowledge of Greek and Roman classics influenced much of his work. For example, Helen Bacon says that, for example, birches, the tree bent down to earth, is evidence of his very attentive reading of Bach. And then you have another characteristic tendency in him, punning. He has it, and most very interestingly, he puns on his own name. What is his name? His name is Robert Frost. In Mending Wall, he says something there is that doesn't love a wall, and the hidden. Then he says the swollen frost in swollen frost under the wall actually breaks the wall. And what is that? And throughout the poem, he does not say who is that who does not like the wall, but he gives us clues. and that for frozen swell of the earth is nothing but Frost himself. So he uses this in at least 44 poems, punning on his own name. Now, coming to the poem that you have to study for today, Christmas Trees, it is the second poem in his collection Mountain Interval, where it was published. And critics like Sergeant Elizabeth Shapley Sergeant, for your information, says records that in 1915 Frost did actually send the poem, and in that it was with a sketch by his daughter Leslie. This poem it is called a Christmas letter. That is something that has become out of fashion. We have all now digital cards now, and I don't know if we don't even if we send digital cards today. We had all these beautiful cards, uh, greeting cards that once upon a time we used to send to each other, and it was at that point that Frost, he used to write these beautiful Christmas letters to his friends. And actually this poem was actually used as a letter, and he actually sent the poem with a sketch by his daughter Leslie to his friends. And it has Christmas Trees has also been published with illustrations as a children's picture book, and it is in the form of an epistle. What now? It is in the form of a letter. And then you may ask me, what is the difference between a letter and an epistle? An epistle is something, letter can be formal letter also. Epistle is something more dramatic, something more poetic. So this, the idea that the poem itself is in a form of a letter is testimony to the fact, that it is very poetic, and then therefore, you novel we talk about the epistolary form, in the form of a letter. The idea that this poem is in the form of an epistle shows that it is either dramatic or it is poetic. But for your information, this particular poem, it is both dramatic and it is also poetic, because this whole poem is in the form of a conversation between two people. That is what makes it dramatic. And the idea that it is in the form of a poem makes it poetic, and all the ideas. And interestingly, this Christmas tree, it is a part of, sorry, because I made this PowerPoint as a very short notice, I have not included most of the quotation marks and all. For just for the students' information, if you have a poem, please enclose it within double quotation marks. And if it is a name of a book, please underline it, or when you type it, please italicize it. So Christmas tree is part. So Christmas tree is part of actually, Frost's Christmas. There is a Christmas poem series penned by Frost, and that contains 35 poems. Though significantly, only two are directly related to Christmas. And this poem, I have already told you that it is dramatic in nature, and therefore we can call it a small play or a playlet, and includes dramatic features of the play. So this, after that, even after the Frost wrote these letters to his friends, and once he became famous, people actually tried to make kind of illustrations, cards, and all. And this is one illustration made by a famous publisher of Frost Christmas trees. Coming to the poem, I already told you that the poem is in the form of an epistle, a Christmas circular letter. So I told you it was a practice in those days to write. We have Christmas cards, to write Christmas letters, and sometimes send gifts. So the whole poem is in the form of a letter, and it mentions how a person, a city dweller, comes into the countryside, and he comes to the speaker and tells him. And I told you, we already spoke of diaspora at the beginning. When you feel nostalgic for your homeland or your native soil, you come back for something that is missing, something that is lost. And it is in such a situation that a buyer from the city comes to the country and comes to the speaker and wants to buy some Christmas trees for him. Why, I told you in diaspora theory also, Normally we cannot bring, we are situated in the host land, we cannot bring the homeland, so we try to create it. Some people, it is said, they take in a suitcase, they take back their ganapati, they take their puja items, they take, and they try to recreate home in another country. It is called a diaspora kit, toolkit. Now here, what does the uh, buyer from the city come and do? He actually wants to buy these Christmas trees, and he wants to place them in the living room of the city, so that some kind of it becomes a diaspora kit of the country side, so he can recreate nature artificially at least. So that is called the diasporic toolkit. So you can see here in essentially the nostalgia for the homeland or the village, as a writer is transported from nature to culture, or from the village to the city. That is the first theme. The second theme of this poem is the idea of marketability, or how things are actually commercialized. How thing, we have a tendency where everything is commercialized in today's world. Even knowledge is commercialized. So on that point, I begin the poem. The city had withdrawn into itself and left at last the country to the country. When between worlds of snow not come to light and worlds of foliage not yet laid, they drove a stranger to our yard who looked the city, yet did in country fashion in that day. Sorry. He sat and waited till he drew us out, buttoning coats, to ask him who he was. He proved to be the city come again, to look for something it had left behind and could not do without and keep its Christmas. So you can see that the poem, we'll go to the next lines later on. So the city has come here, the city has withdrawn into itself. What do you mean by the term withdrawn? Normally we withdraw from something. Normally when you're addicted to something, you withdraw. You call withdrawal symptoms. So the city is actually, it is addicted to the country, but the city, though it is addicted to the country, that is a nostalgia for the homeland, for the country. It is withdrawn into itself, and it has left at last the country to the country. Okay. And but in such a situation, and another important thing I want to tell you is, what is the figure of speech in the first line? Students, the city has withdrawn to itself. What is the figure of speech? The first line, students?
Andromorphism.
Anthropomorphism. Okay, anthropomorphism in a way, yes, or personification also.
Personally.
Anthropomorphism, personification.
Okay, okay.
Okay, good, Hakim. Anthropomorphism, or in a, so, okay, in a way it is. Yes, it is. There is a very thin line divide. To distinguish anthropomorphism and personification. The city is taking on, what do you say, human qualities. It has withdrawn. It is personified. That is probably the best. Why do actually poets employ personification to show, to make it more vivid, to make it more dramatic. So the city finally, it is not the people, but the city itself has withdrawn itself and left the country to the country. When between worlds of snow not come to light, the snow is not coming there to light. When in such a situation, when there is no snow to come and obstruct the way, or whirls of foliage, or any kind of greenery, or anything that has not come to block the way, what happens? There drove a stranger to our yard who looked the city. Now, how would this sentence normally be? A stranger to our yard drove there. But Frost writes it as, there drove a stranger to our yard. So, from what I have told you before regarding the features of poetry, what is this an example of, students? What is that an example of? That sentence that I just told you now. I have just mentioned the different features of prose poetry. Instead of saying, you can type in the chat box or you can unmute your mics. You're free to do both. Instead of saying, um, instead of saying a stranger to our yard drove there, the sentence is they drove a stranger to our yard who looked the city. What is that an example of?
Diaspora, diasporic element la.
Not diasporic element. I'm talking about the stylistic features. I'm happy Hakim is so active. Oh, I want all of you to be active. Respond. I talked about certain stylistic features. What was that? Something there is that doesn't love a wall. When you write it, a sentence that is, that should actually be there is something that doesn't love a wall. When it is written as something there is that doesn't love a wall, what is that an example of? I just explained that. It is an example of, look in the chat box, inverted statement or anistrophe. It is also called anistrophe. Okay, right? Is that clear now, students? Please type in the chat box. This is becoming very one-sided. Is that clear to all of you? Okay. Okay, good. Please respond. Otherwise, how do I know that it is registering? Okay, fine. So instead of that, you have that statement. They drove a stranger to our yard who looked the city. The stranger looks the city man. He looks perfectly like a city man. Okay. He looks in his dress, in his attire, he looks like a city man, yet did in country fashion in that there. He actually is a city man, but his arrival is in a country fashion. He sat and waited. Probably that patience is a signature of country life, because city life, city people, we generally call it a fast forward life. They say patience is not exactly their virtue. He said yet did it in country fashion in that day. What was his mannerism or his character trait in terms of country life? He was patient. He sat, sorry, and waited till he drew us out. He sat it patiently. That is a virtue of the countryside, patience. And he brought us out, buttoning coats to ask him who he was. Okay, and we came out buttoning our coats, and it is winter, obviously from Christmas. And they came out buttoning their coats to ask him who he was. He proved to be the city come again, as Hakim just said, the diasporic element. Why does the city come back? It is not coming back, it is coming back again. Why? Because they feel a strong diasporic longing for the countryside. Something that you leave behind. When you go to a Gulf or any foreign country, you actually long for the smell of the soil, for the smell of pickles, uh, so that kind of diasporic longing, he proved to be the city come again to look for something it has left behind. Always, if you go to a foreign land, all of you, after getting a job, you will always have the feeling you have left something behind. Most of the time, it is your heart. Your body is there. But why do we go abroad? We go abroad due to financial considerations, to make money. Some of them, out of their helplessness. So this person also is in the city actually to make money. In most of the cases of diaspora, whether it is the popular diaspora, nature diaspora, Frost himself, he always wanted to be close to nature, but he went into the cities to teach, or to teach only to make money. He never he Ironically, he's known as a farmer poet of America, but most of his life he spent in cities. And he was always nostalgic for the countryside. And if he liked the country life so much, why did he go into cities? He went into the cities to make money for his family. All his children had some kind of problem. Depression was a strong tendency that was running in his family. and many of his children were afflicted with depression all, and well after the idols, just imagine, കുട്ടികളെല്ലാം കുറേ വലുതായിട്ട് ആ മാരിയബിൾ ഏജ് കഴിഞ്ഞിട്ടും Frost was actually supporting all of them, and for that he needed lot of money. So though he was very closely affiliated to the country life or nature, he had to go into the city life and teach. So here also, the person who is coming here, he proved to be the city come again to look for something it had left behind, and could not do without and keep its Christmas. Did you understand that? Suppose so you're coming back to Kerala from Gulf to get just an artificial pookalam, so you can keep it in your living room in Dubai. Okay, just to get that feeling of Onam. So likewise, he's coming behind. He's coming for some Christmas trees that he cannot do without and keep its Christmas. Our Christmas tree illade, his Christmas will never be complete. And he coming to the speaker and asking him, if I would sell my Christmas trees, my woods, the young fir balsams like a lace. He's asking him. So for the first time, the poet himself is not realizing. He only thought of them as firs, FIR, fir trees. He unknowingly, he himself has, the idea of materialism has now entered his head also. And he is asked if he's narrating. I'm asked if I would sell my Christmas trees, my woods, the young fir balsams like a place. Why is it like a place? Because for him, each tree was a house in itself. That is how important nature or his tree was to him. They houses all, and each tree was like a house where houses all are churches. All the trees were like houses to him, and these houses were churches. That means that is how holy for him a tree was. Now, why do people cut trees? We talk about ecofeminism and all. Why do people cut trees? Would you cut a living animal and a living tree if you cut them both? And is it the same kind of responses it evokes? Do you have the same feeling after cutting off the tree or a living animal? Is the feeling the same? No, when it is an animal, you find a kind of, your heart goes out. And if it is a human being, then you. But then why does it not cross our mind that a tree also has life? There was a national award moving by Girish Karnad called Cheluvi, where a girl, she has the ability to turn into a tree. And then one day, someone, she's not supposed to reveal the secret to anyone, and the person who gives a mendicant, a sage actually gives her the gift one day for saving his life, and he tells her that nobody should break off the branches or the flowers, otherwise, you will lose the power of becoming a tree. So one day, without accidentally, she reveals the secret to her sister-in-law, and her sister-in-law becomes a tree, and all they break off the branches. Tries to use the mantra and pull her back. She's half woman, half tree, and that movie is there. It's a beautiful movie. She's actually writhing in pain. But when a woman, we see a woman tree writhing in pain, our heart goes out. But when a tree is cut off, why does not our heart go out to the tree? Why does it not dawn on us that it also has a life? Therefore, in that particular movie, Cheluvi by Girish Karnad, by personifying the tree, by humanizing the tree, Girish Karnad has actually tried to evoke our human emotions. Similarly, here, see, in the first part, he's saying, okay, when you say it's a tree, okay, you can sell it off. But your house, will you sell off your house so easily that you have a sentimental attachment to? No. And particularly, all these houses are churches. They are holy for me and have spires. Churches have spires. The spear-like thing on top of the churches. So how a Christmas tree is also. It is like this, conical in form. So that conical shape of the Christmas tree is actually compared to spires. And you can see that the church imagery and nature imagery juxtaposed there. Which was the first religion that came? on earth? All of you tell me. Which was the first religion? Which was the first religion that came on earth? What was first worshipped before all these institutionalized religions? Human beings worship the Aditya sadhana in their Malango. What was the first? Nature, exactly, Sandeep. It was the nature. All you. That is why in the beginning you have all these, and particularly that is the most holy and omnipresent thing that we see on earth, actually as a manifestation of God itself. And that is why you find this juxtaposition of the church imagery and the nature imagery, the conical shape of the fir tree, Christmas tree, and also the spire of the churches. He says, I hadn't thought of them as Christmas trees. I had never thought of. I thought of them as holy, as probably, but never as Christmas. Why? What is he saying? When you sell a Christmas tree, you get money. He says, I have never thought of them as material things, as things capable of, uh, that things that can be used as commodities, or commodification of the Christmas trees. And he himself says, I doubt if I was tempted for a moment to sell them off their feet to go in cars. So he himself, even he feels, though he's so attached to those trees, he considers them their houses, his churches. He himself is tempted to sell them off their feet. Just imagine, sell them off their feet, then you cut it off from the ഏറ്റവും താഴെന്നാണ് മരത്തിനെ കട്ട് ചെയ്യുക. You sell them, and you're selling them off their feet. They are losing their feet, off their feet, so they go in cars. So again, what is the figure of speech? There is personification or humanization. Personification or humanization. And again, as I told you, there's a technique used in Cheluvi. Okay, when it's a tree and you're cutting them off and you're sending them off, suddenly it's okay with us. But if they are humanized, there is somebody who has been with you all along, suddenly they're leaving you and going, off their feet, you're going in cars, you feel very sad if it's a human being. So that is why here also the poet actually humanizes the tree. And leave the slope behind the house all bare. And just imagine, once all these trees will go off, the slope behind the house will be all bare. It will be empty. Where the sun shines now no warmer than the moon. The sun is shining here, but it is no warmer than the moon. Why? Because of all these trees, that shade is there. A tunnel in because of all these trees. That is why the sun shines now no warmer than the moon. I'd hate to have them know it if I was. Yet, yeah, I would like to, even if I wanted to sell the tree, uh, I would hate to let them know that I wanted to sell the tree. Yet more, I'd hate to hold my trees except as other holds there or refuse for them beyond the time of profitable growth. He says, yet more, I'd hate to hold my trees except, you know, as other hold. Okay, that is one possibility. But another possibility is, I would hate to hold my trees except as, I'd hate more to hold my trees only for the reason that it is for some kind of profitable growth. Okay, either I let go of my trees or probably I'm waiting for more money to come in, because the trial by market, everything must come to, because in this world everything is defined by, currently in this world of era of competition, everything is defined by marketability and profitability. As Wallace Stevens says in The Emperor of Ice Cream, the only emperor is the emperor of ice cream. In an age of commercialization, we all go by all these material things: commodification, reification, and material pleasures, commercialization. Because beyond the time of profitable growth, the trial by market, everything must come. Now everything is defined by market principles. And I dallied so much with the thought of selling. I was playing with the idea either should I sell it or should I not sell it? Should I sell it or not? Whether from mistaken courtesy and fear of seeming short of speech, or whether from hope of hearing good of what was mine, I said, these, they aren't enough to be worthwhile. I could soon tell how many they would cut. You let me look them over. So the poet is telling us from mistaken courtesy. Courtesy means maryada. A kind of mistaken maryada. In a kind of like I said something probably that I shouldn't have. Was it from kind of mistaken courtesy? Or maybe because sometimes you go somewhere, everybody speaks sometimes for the sake of saying something, you say something. Or fear, that is what? Fear of seeming short of speech. Okay, he was not talking at all. Or did he say what he said because he was seeming short of speech? Or from hope of hearing good of what was mine? Or from, hope of hearing good of what was mine. This is something we all do, fishing for compliments. If you want to hear something good, sometimes we have a tendency, we'll say, oh, I don't look beautiful at all. So at that time, somebody will, somebody will definitely say, you look very beautiful. That is what you call fishing for compliments. Similarly, from hope of hearing good of what was mine, he has some kind of hope that okay, he will hear something good about what is his. And keeping these three things in mind, these three reasons, he says there aren't enough to be worthwhile. Okay, ഇതിനത്ര വിലയൊന്നും കിട്ടൂല, അത്ര worthwhile ഒന്നും അല്ല. That is what he's saying. Oh, what does the other person say? He says, I could tell how many they would cut. He'll say, the other person who has come to buy them, you let me look, let me see how many are buyable. And then the speaker says, you could look, but don't expect I'm going to let you have them. He says, okay, don't think that I'm going to let you sell them to you. Pasture they spring in, some in clumps too close. Okay, as pasture, this is a bit confusing, this particular construction. This is pasture. It has a pun, pasture they spring in. Okay, they are in the form of a pasture. That is again his characteristic tendency to use inverted sentences. Instead of saying they spring in pasture, if he said they spring in pastures, we would understood. They form a pasture by themselves. But instead he's saying pasture they spring in. For your information, I'm repeating inverted statement or anistrophe. Some in clumps too close. What happens, when these trees grow, very close to each other, they are in clumps. They grow in clumps too close. And that time what happens, അവര് ട്രീസ് ശരിക്കും ഗ്രോ ചെയ്യോ ഇല്ല, അവര് ലോബ് സൈഡഡ് ആയിട്ടാണ് ഗ്രോ ചെയ്യുക. അപ്പം so those trees will not be very useful, that trees that grow close and grow like this. So that lob each other of boughs, and not only that, some will be like this. So each tree will interfere with the growth of other, and they will lob each other of boughs. So the some trees branches will be stunted. നിങ്ങൾക്കറിയാം അടുത്ത് വളരുമ്പോൾ അതിന്റെ growth stunted ആയിരിക്കും. So he says some are good, some in clumps too close, that lob each other of boughs, but not a few quite solitary and have equal bows. Those that are standing alone, solitary, those that are standing alone and having equal bows are good, and those are, those are the ones that can actually be sold all round and round, because those are standing alone and they have their shape is perfect. The latter he nodded yes to. He said, yeah, you're right. And paused to say beneath some lovelier one with a buyer's moderation, that would do. And he's looking at he's standing below a lovelier Christmas tree, and he's saying with a buyer's moderation, a buyer ഒരു moderation ഉണ്ടല്ലോ, that he will decide, okay, he's moderating everything, this is right and this is wrong. So with that sense of moderation, he's saying, okay, this one will do. I thought so too, but wasn't there to say so. Second. Okay. That, but they were stressed. So what happened? We climbed the pasture on the south. crossed over and came down on the north. So they are, they climbed. So they are scanning the whole pasture of Frost's land. On the south, crossed over, then they came down the north. Then he counted and he said 1,000. He counted, and Frost himself does not realize he has so many trees, he has so many fir trees, and he asked for the first time. Just note, he is asking 1,000 Christmas trees. So without his realizing itself, he that material instinct is coming there. Christmas, he's calling his own trees for the sometime Christmas trees. At what a piece! Suddenly, he himself, when you say, okay, I have 1,000 trees. If I sell them, okay, what amount will I get? He felt some need of softening that to me. Whatever the person is going to say, he's softening it a bit. Sometimes we use euphemism. That is a way of softening something. There is some a negative or offensive word. We would give a good touch to it. Suppose, for example, you somebody died, we say pass away, or prostitutes are called sex workers, or toilet cleaners are called washroom engineers, toilets are called restrooms. So he also found the need of softening that. Instead of saying they are only one this much one piece, he says 1,000 trees would come to $30, and he found the need to soften that to him. Then I was certain I had never meant. Okay, for this 1,000 trees, only that itself was softened to him. And he says then I was certain I had never meant to let him have him. Edukku ചെറിയ temptation വന്നു when he hears he has 1,000 trees. But then when hears that he's only going to get $30 for it, he's sure that he was never going to let him have them. Never show surprise. But $30 seems so small beside the extent of pasture I should strip. That whole extent of pasture, something that those trees that were actually human to me, that were houses to me, and that were in turn churches to me or very holy to me, I should strip that at 3 cents. So do you find out how the seller, without telling, they are 3 paise each or 3 cents each, very euphemistically, he softens the whole thing and tells him they're $30. So very cunning of him. For that was all they figured out of his. Just imagine all the tree that you brought up with so much love and care. They're only 3 cents or 3 paise in our currency. 3 cents, so small beside the dollar, friends. Now, just keep in mind, this is in the form of a Christmas letter, and in some critiques, it is mentioned that he has the idea that even if he were to sell these, he's writing all these letters to his friends. This Christmas letter to his friend. This whole poem is in the form of an epistle. I already told you. So he has the idea that if he were to individually sell these to his friends, each tree he would at least get $1. So 1,000 trees means $1,000. Here, just imagine he's getting just $30, and he says 3 cents, so small beside the dollar, friends. I should be writing to within the hour. He's within the hour. He's saying, I'm so sure that even if I were to write to them, they would give me at least $1 per Christmas tree. And he is sure that this person who is going to buy from him all these trees, he would pay in cities for good trees like those. This person will probably go to the city and sell them for $1 each. And so how much will that man get? He will get $1,000 instead of these 30 measly dollars. Would pay in cities for good trees like those. Regular vestry trees, whole Sunday schools. You know, these trees, what is a vestry? A vestry, if I understand, probably Roy sir will tell you better, is a room attached in a church, where, certain things are actually ceremonialized. So here also, when you're taking an ordinary tree from nature, and you're actually, there is a process of ceremonialization going when you're treating it into a Christmas tree, a symbol of Christianity. But are you making it holy, or are you making it more unholy, is the question. When you're materializing a tree, is the process, is it actually regular vestry trees that actually hold Sunday schools of Christianity, when you're institutionalizing or you're institutionalizing is a wrong word, ceremonializing these kind of trees into a symbol of Christianity, somewhere is the in the form when you're materializing it, when you're material or commodifying it, is somewhere the holiness lost or is it gained? That is the question he puts up. And that is why throughout the poem you can find the juxtaposition of uh, natural imagery. I told you in the beginning itself, the conical shape of the fir tree is compared to the spires of the church. Now you have the there's the term vestry trees. Again, vestry trees. Can somebody tell me what is that? Vestry, a noun, is converted into an adjective. Vestry, a noun, a word that is normally used when you say vestry tree, it is converted into an adjective. So I mentioned this in one of the features of Frost. So what is that feature called? Converting one class of word normally used as one class into another. Very good, Ashwati. It is Antimaria. It is known as Antimaria. Where so you can see vestry is normally used as a noun, but here he uses the term vestry trees, where a noun is normally not used as an adjective, is converted into an adjective. So that is an example I told you. You can find these signature features in Frost, Antimaria. So regular vestry trees, whole Sunday schools could hang enough onto pick off. These regular vestry streets that are actually Sunday schools. You know what? I told you the process of ceremonialization takes place in these Sunday schools or vestries. But the problem is Frost himself is questioning all religions. You pay any kind of Islam and Hinduism also. You have a lot of what do you call nerchas made. And one innocent child I remember in some program asking, God in Devathinu kaikuli edukano. So the question is, are all these rituals itself being materialized? Are we actually making it more holy, or is it becoming unholy? So these trees, you have all seen the pictures of Christmas trees. You have all these gifts hanging, right? You have all these gifts hanging on all. So it could hang enough to hang enough on to pick off. So these Christmas trees have so many gifts that can hang enough so that we can pick them off. Like plucking apples off a tree. 1,000 Christmas trees I didn't know I had. So the idea is he himself did not know the worth. So the idea is uh, he realizes their material worth, and through that materialization, he realizes the spiritual worth. That is the irony and the beauty of this poem. Worth 3 cents more to give away than sell. He says that worth 3 cents, I would, if it is only worth 3 cents, I would rather give them away than sell them. That is the beauty of it. I would rather, if somebody places a money on them, I would rather give it as a gift than give them place any material value on them. That is the beauty, and that would be my Christmas gift, as may be shown by a simple calculation. Too bad I couldn't lay one in a letter. He says, and even I told you in the beginning itself, this whole poem is written as a beautiful Christmas epistle, a letter. And I told you the difference between a letter and an epistle is that an epistle is more dramatic and poetic. And you can find both these qualities in that. There is poetry and there is also dramatic, as it is a conversation between two people. And he says, I wish I could give you the mathematics there. You cannot define life by mathematics. Even road not taken, he puts, you cannot define everything into mathematics. In road not taken also, those two roads, they were once upon a time, some 10 years back, you had, after plus two, what would they would be two roads. Either you would go for engineering or you would go for medicine. Those were two logical alternatives. There were no other. That is what all parents. But now things have changed. I got a seat for engineering, but I didn't go. I took the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference. അതേപോലെ ലൈഫിൽ you cannot treat all options as logical alternatives. You cannot treat everything as mathematical units. Either I will travel this road or this road. No. And all mathematics cannot be shown by a simple calculation. Too bad I couldn't lay one in a letter. And so sad I could not show my friends that all these calculations comes up to nothing. I can't help wishing I could send you one. In wishing you here with a Merry Christmas. So sad that, along with this letter, I cannot send you a beautiful Christmas tree. Instead, I would rather give it away than sell it to someone else. Give it to you for free, then give it to someone else for money. And it is in this that I wish you a Merry Christmas. Okay, so that's the poem. And some important points. We find the city withdrawing to itself, like other poems, like Into My Own and Acquainted with the Night. Also, I told you, you have that idea of diaspora and frost, where the person from nature is displaced into culture. So you have the person from the countryside displaced onto the city, and this idea of the city withdrawing, in the beginning we saw that line. You have this in other poems like Into My Own and Acquainted with the Night also. Again, it is a poem. I already told you about diasporic longing. It is about a poem about the city and the country, the city people having a diasporic longing for the countryside. Again, about marketing and profitability. And I also showed you some examples of anistrophe and antimaria of, instead of the sentence, a stranger drove to our yard, he writes, they drove a stranger to our yard. So, example of inverted sentence or anistrophe. Personification of trees, that is ecofeminism. You see, when trees normally cut, we do not have any feeling. But just imagine, as I told you, the example of Girish Karnad's Cheluvi, when you humanize the tree, okay, it becomes one of us. And then we have the pain in their getting cut. We get the pain in their leaving off in cars. And then we develop some kind of feeling for them. So you have ecofeminist overtones also here. And then tree and church imagery, I told you there is, you cannot link ceremonialization and commodification, but unfortunately with all religions, whether it is Christianity, Hinduism, Islam, all these rites, rituals are uh, commodifying. Instead of what happens in the name of ceremonialization is what happens is commodification. There is materialization. We have godfathers, godmothers, reification is happening place. And we have all typical other features. We have alliteration, imagery, enjambment, something, that you cannot be clear about. When one line, look at these lines here, you find lines, they are running on to the next line most of the time without any punctuation. Just like, that is symbolic of the trees, running on without any boundaries. Frost was against boundaries. In Mendingwall also he uses the technique of enjambment. There is no you do not find much punctuation or end stop lines, and lines run on from one to the another to show the need of there should be no boundaries for walls and there should be no boundaries for trees. Okay, so that is all today. So then on a I end on that note that it is better to give away for free than to sell for profit. So probably that will be the crux of the poem. And the city goes back to the country to search for something it has left behind. So these two lines actually summarize the crux of this poem. So I hope you have understood. Would like to see your responses if you have, sir. The class is over. Taken 1.5 hours. Roy, sir, if you're there.
Yeah, yes, I am here, madam.
Okay.
It is so fantastic, wonderful. And students, you can ask questions if you have any. Any clarification required? Please come forward. If no one is there with any queries, Madam, we can conclude this, I hope. Anyway, from my side, what I feel is this very good session. And also, I think our students might have enjoyed it very well. Being on online, it is the maximum. Both students of both colleges are sitting together and enjoying a class from a person.